Hi, friends, I'm Chisom, and this is Overnight Wisdom, a space for quiet reflections and deep conversations with people shaping the world in seen and unseen ways. We explore the turning points and quiet revolutions that shape how we see ourselves and the world. Because some wisdom arrives slowly, quietly, or all at once, and it always leaves a mark. In this episode, we sit with Michael Aboya, the celebrated Ghanaian photographer known for capturing the raw poetry of everyday life. We explore the moments that shaped his artistry, the wisdom he has gained through persistence and patience, and what he's learned from grief and success. We also learn how he sees photography as a bridge between souls and much more. Today, we get to know a little bit about a man who doesn't just take photos, he listens with his camera and shows us who we are. Let's get to it. Hi, Michael. Really happy to have you here today. Thanks for taking the time. Normally, when I start conversations with guests, I like to say how I know them. And I first heard about your work from a mutual friend, Claudia. Your work of art, I would say, it's because it's not just a photograph. She has a lot of your work in her living room, and it's absolutely stunning. So when I started working on this podcast and reached out to friends to see who they thought I should speak with, naturally, she suggested you. So thanks for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And Claudia sent me a picture of how she hanged them, and I must admit it's actually really amazing. I love it as well.
Quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump right into things. I think, your work has impacted so many, not just in Ghana or the African continent, but also globally. And you've shared that the passing of your father in 2016 was a pivotal moment that prompted you to pursue photography. You noted that the acknowledgement that you were too going to die someday forced you in some sense to do something that you love, and in this case, photography. So I guess what I'd like to lean in on is, how did this personal loss influence your artistic vision and the stories you aim to tell through your lens?
So losing my dad, this was in 2016. It made me realize how short life can be. But before that, I lived almost like there was no that tomorrow will always come. So there's no rush. But after losing him and seeing this happen to someone that I really had deep admiration for, there was this kind of pain that I've never really experienced before. And it was the type of pain that kept me quiet for some days, because then I didn't know how to express myself or what to say, how to think or how to feel. But one thing that I can remember is that I was asking questions in my head, and it pushed me to ask a series of important questions. And one of them was, what would I regret not doing if I should also die today? And the answer was actually quite simple. And I wanted to live life doing something that I loved. And I don't know if this was more of like a way for myself to not feel the pain as much, to do something that makes me feel alive again. And the there were so many things that I tried to explore. I know I love music so much. And the last gift my dad left for me was a guitar. And he loves music as well. And one of the last things he spent doing was to just lay down and listen to some quality music. And it was actually really beautiful to see. So initially, I thought I was supposed to do something in music. And I started to learn how to play the guitar. And it helped actually, because I wasn't feeling that loneliness anymore. I wasn't feeling that pain. And the reason why I say loneliness is because after it happened, I found myself pulling back from everyone and I found myself on a journey of searching. But when I started to play the guitar and I added my voice to it, I realized that, oh, this is not going to work because I have a very horrible singing voice. um, but that didn't stop me because then I realized that anytime I listen to music, I have this very vivid imagination where there's a whole world in my head and it felt so real. I could visibly see with my eyes closed and I just needed to find a way to bring these emotions out to life. But there was one thing that was happening that I actually did not notice, and that was that I was always taking pictures. In the family, I always took the pictures, the group photos. When I was in church, I was the one with the selfie stick taking pictures after service. So I gathered a whole ton of images of friends and families. One day, I had a friend's camera with me, and whilst listening to music, I had the camera and was taking pictures. And I realized something in the moment that my emotions and how I felt inside, I could actually translate into photographs. I didn't know exactly how, but I felt something magical in that process of clicking the shutter and freezing a moment. And in this moment, I felt this was something that I needed to try. But at the time, I was studying computer science, and the camera was I had for the first time wasn't my camera. It was a friend's camera, which I had for a very brief moment. So one point, I dropped out from school. The plan was to use my fees to get my first camera, do some work, and when I get the money, I go back to school. But after getting the camera, I realized that it's much more difficult than I expected it to be, and there was no way I was going to afford my fees anymore. So I only had one choice to figure something out from photography and make it happen. My mom wasn't happy that I dropped out, and this is obvious because every parent wants the best for their child. But I looked ahead and I felt that this is something I needed to do, and I went for it. Photography became a way to process my grief and to find beauty in the world again. It became my purpose and helped me turn my pain into healing for me and for others.
That is so beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about what you said about, your dad passing and dealing with this pain and, resonated for me. I lost my dad in 2015 and I
Sorry.
remember, oh, thank you. I remember being in a state of it was an out of body pain, in a
Mm,
sense, where
yeah.
I too couldn't really understand what was happening. And then I found myself like unraveling a bit and grappling with, did I say enough? What did I say to him? What was the last couple of conversations that we had? I remember we had an argument. Does he know I love him? There's just so much that was happening in my body. And I remember also not leaving the bathtub for a few days because that was the only way I could almost put up with the pain.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to almost be levitating in water. And I also recall just how I transformed or changed my life after that experience. I think there's something about losing a parent that tears us apart in a way. So I want to thank you for sharing that. And about your mom, of course, like no parent, maybe even African parent is ever going to say, yeah, go do art, because of course they want you to be in a profession that can secure you a sensible living. But I think I can speak for myself and the rest of the world and was so thankful that you went down that path because now we get to see the world through your eyes and how you present your work, how you present your subjects, if I can call them that, and also the environment in which they live in such an authentic way. So, on behalf of the world, thank you.
Thank you too. Just to add to that, if you ask me, I wouldn't really. I felt like the start of the journey was with pain, and most of the time, pain kind of like pushes us to a part of self discovery. But sometimes I do think that I wish I'd found this without having to go through all that pain. But then the hard truth is, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be here today. There was no way. I'll probably be doing something in computer science, and I would have completed, had my degree, and probably doing something in computer science and not be a photographer. Maybe taking pictures. I know some way, somehow, we always find a way to become what we need to be. Probably I'll be taking pictures, but maybe not on this scale that I'm doing right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think what you say about pain is important. There's a saying, this pain must mean something to me. And I think like your pain has unraveled you in ways, as you say, we get to see the work you do at the scale. And I mean, you're also quite young. So just trying to imagine what you would do in 10 years and 20 years and 40 years, like I'm just in awe of your work. Unfortunately, sometimes it comes through pain, but I think the rest of us also get to be nourished in some sense from the work that you do. I want to talk about how you embrace your journey to the eight. So I want to ask you to elaborate on what is its significance? What does it capture in terms of your evolution as an individual and perhaps um, as an artist?
So the story behind it is actually very broad. It's actually hard for me to put it, and the explanation that I'll give, like this actually started on the same day I lost my dad. I remember he asked me to record an audio of him saying his final words, and he was going through some pain. And after that, I slept on the bed right next to him. And for some reason, I felt that this was all going to pass and he'll be fine again, everything will be okay. But it happened not to be the case. So I slept that night next to him by the hospital, and I had a dream. And in my dream, I just saw the number eight. I didn't really understand why I would see a number in such a situation or in a moment like this. My dream should actually be the opposite, where I see like a whole world where my dad is okay and fine. And that was it. I woke up, my dad had passed, and then the whole journey started. So, in the process of actually trying to figure out my purpose, trying to find myself through photography, I also wanted to understand what my family name Aboya means. So, I went on a journey to ask people what it meant. And for some reason, I didn't understand why I did not ask my dad this question when he was around. Like, it's my name, it's my family name. Of course, you should ask him these questions. This points back to like the fact that I was thinking that I would live forever and we'll all live forever. So it started to draw my attention when I found out in numerology that Aboya means eight. So the moment I saw this, it took me back to my dream. And then I was like, wait, I saw this in my dream. Like, does it mean something? So I started to go into like research, trying to understand what the number eight means. But in the process of how far I've come, I think it means for me a process of becoming, of rebirth, of new beginning. And the fun part about it is that when you turn the number to the side, it becomes a symbol of infinity or a way to express endless growth. And it started to evolve, and it meant to find balance spiritually, emotionally, and creatively. And through my photography, I'm not just trying to capture images, I'm documenting my own inner transformation from who I used to be to who I can become, and to understand my purpose and to bring balance in my life, not just for me, but for those who come into contact with my images and those who I photo.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that path of becoming and documenting your journey, it's evident in your pictures because it's not just a photo. It tells a lot of stories, like in the way you capture people's emotions, people's trusts. I mean, the things you see in people's eyes. I can show a single one of your images to a bunch of my friends and they'd see something completely different. And I think that's what's really beautiful about your work. So I want to lean in on the kind of your creative process, right? So you're a visual storyteller, and your photographs are renowned for capturing profound emotions and narratives. So, how do you specifically or broadly approach storytelling through imagery? And what elements do you consider essential to convey a compelling story?
Emotions, as you said, this is the most important element for me. And I always start with emotions. And that comes right back to me. How do I feel? What do I see in my mind? And how best can I capture these images and create something beautiful? And the first process doesn't start with me holding the camera. It always starts with me listening. And I always ensure that I listen deeply to the people, to the environment, and listen to myself as well. I don't just show up and then start shooting. I wait for the feeling to rise, to build trust, to get to know the people and allow the people to get to know me. And when this happens, the image becomes a story and not just a picture. Because when people are very comfortable and that barrier of being a stranger is broken, people show you a side to themselves that they wouldn't really show to a stranger. And when this happened, I think this is when the magic starts to show itself. I wouldn't really say magic, but something really beautiful starts to show itself. And then, as simple as the images may look, they hold something valuable, which is the emotions, where you are able to understand a person through a smile or through the eyes or the facial expression. And when you have this element in a photograph where you're able to capture not just the picture itself, but you're able to capture these emotions, the image has a way to speak for itself without you having to try so much. And I feel that when you do something like this, you don't find yourself on a roller coaster of always having to capture images every single time. Because one essential goal that I have is to find balance and not get lost into what I feel is my purpose. To find balance being a creative, being an elder brother, and being a friend, and just having all this come together to become one. You can go focus on other things and then come back to continue being a creator and being and finding your purpose. But if you take images that don't really speak, then you find yourself on a constant loop to always take pictures because then they have a very short time span, and after that trend is over, then you have to create again. So if me being a creator is able to capture images and can speak for itself without you having to be there, then you can focus on other things, because being an artist isn't just about creating images, it's about being human as well. And being human requires you to there's a whole lot: a father, a lover.
Oh, I love listening to you. I think beyond being an artist, I think that there are nuggets you've said here that all of us can learn from, regardless of what we do, and how we spend our time or how we create whatever it is we create. So thank you for that. I'm thinking about your artistic process, and I really love what you say about, at least what I heard. What came up for me was creating pictures and work that live forever. You know, it's not necessarily what is on trend now, it's just things that transcend time that people can look at any point, you know, and still feel a very strong emotional connection to. And I think, you know, your work exemplifies that. So I want to talk a bit about your rituals for creation, right? You talk about you take photos, you go away and you come back and, you know, you see how it shakes out. So before you press the shutter, you know, before the image is actually born, do you have a process? Do you have something that you do to prepare you into entering that space of deep witnessing?
I always start with emotions, and the emotion starts from me and how I feel. And the best way to trigger these emotions is by listening to music. And anytime I listen to music, it's able to trigger some type of emotional response that sparks this visual elements in my mind where I find very beautiful, and I'm like, I have to create this. So then I would write it down, and then go out to scout, to see, to find people, talk to people, and see who would match this imagination that I saw in my head. Who has the character? I would say more of like a casting process, but it's not a casting process. But just going around and see who has that energy that matches up to what I saw. Sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's books, but most of the time it starts with me listening to music, and it helps me slow down, feel centered, and connect with the moment. And then I go out there, I create, and after accomplishing what I had set out to do, then I end it with music again to give me the feeling of, yes, you've done it. Now feel good about yourself and go home and look at it. So the process is just basically very simple. It's just doing something that makes you feel uh, or spark some type of emotion. There's one I haven't actually mentioned, but the cover of my book I released recently, this one.
Nice. I love that photo.
This one didn't even start with music. It started with an argument with somebody that I really cared about. And I felt that I had hurt the person and I shouldn't have done that. So I went on a long drive. So I just sat in my car. I drove for like 4 hours. I got to the destination. Thankfully, I had my camera. I didn't plan to shoot or do whatsoever. But the emotion, the way I felt, led me to capture this image because I sat down and I was paying attention to what was happening in the environment. Some way, somehow, I was able to put myself in there. And the question I had was, what was the line between purpose and being who you are? So I tried to create a visual representation of that. But after creating it, the emotions felt real to me and to those who came in contact with the image. And after a few months working with the publisher, and I suggested some images that they could use for the cover, everybody said they loved this one. Why? Connected to them in one way or another and was really in striking, and it said something to everybody in different ways. So starting with the emotions helps you create something really good. And for me, it always starts with music because music helps me trigger an emotional response, and I can create images that speaks through. I have a photograph. The last photograph I shot with my dad, and the last photograph I shot with my mom. And one thing I realized is that of all the images that I had captured over the time with my parents, these last ones really stood out to me because I had no idea that those were going to be the last. And it holds this emotional value where it's like a mix between I wish that wasn't the last photograph, and I'm happy that I was able to capture something at that point. Something happened in that brief moment that led you to raise up your camera and shoot and capture that image to save that memory, and having that memory last forever. So, this image, regardless of the quality or how bad it looks, still holds emotional value. And it's something that I would keep for as long as I can, for like the generations after to see and to learn something, ask themselves questions.
Thanks for sharing. And I'm also sorry for the loss of your both parents. I can't even imagine. I'm sure that's not easy.
Yeah, thank you.
A few follow-up questions because there's a lot you said there. And first thing I want to ask is you have a new book. I did not know this, so tell me more about the book.
The book is actually titled with the same question you asked me, Journey to the Eight, because my journey, the whole time, it's been a journey, finding myself, finding balance, and it's a combination of images that I shot in different elements. It's something that I started working on some years back, where I realized that people express themselves differently in different elements. So there are people who love to be around water, and when they're around water, they express themselves in a very beautiful way. Same with people who sit around the fireside camping, people who love to be in the air, like skydiving, a very beautiful view up the mountain, and people who just love to be home. So I mean, the book is a division of this element showcasing people in their elements, just shining and being effortless. It's an amazing book. And when I received it and I held it for the first time, I almost like let out a tear because I never really imagined that I would have my first book. And it was actually a very difficult one to think about and to create and to find the right publishing house. But everything came together beautifully well. And the feedback has been amazing. And when I had my exhibition to launch it, I had my book and my dad's book together, and I had people write because my dad wrote a short note for me in his book. So, and that helped me and took me a long way. So I had people write short notes in my personal book to give the same emotional response just as my dad did to me.
Thanks a lot for sharing. Where can we find the book?
I'll send a link, but it's
Yeah.
on my publisher's website.
Okay.
It's in limited quantities, collector's edition.
Nice. I'd love to order one, and I think I'd also love to share with our good
Thank you.
listeners as well, where they can find it. You talked about music. What is your favorite go-to music or genre?
I love to listen to folk music or some rap music because rap music gives me the emotional response to get up and do something.
Yeah, the
And it's very
energy.
active.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst the folktale music is like storytelling, but in a music format where someone expressing himself through music and they're actually saying a series of words that connects to something, talking about home, talking about someone or feeling. And the way they play the musical instrument has a way to kind of like evoke those feelings.
When I think of you and the work that you do, I also see a lot of work around reframing narratives. I think that your work challenges stereotypical portrayals of Africa. I think it highlights beauty, it highlights diversity. And I think, at least from what I can tell, it also appears quite important in your work. Your photography has also contributed to reshaping how the continent is seen, even how art or photography is seen, especially when we toss Africa in the mix. So I guess my question to you is, when you lift your camera, whose hopes and histories do you feel you're carrying with you?
That's actually a very deep question.
Mhm.
um One thing I realized is that I started to reshape the narrative without actually realizing that I was doing it, because at the time there was so much pain in me, and I realized that there's too much pain in the world, and instead of focusing on more pain, I decided to look at the other side and figure out if there's actually love, beauty on the other side. Well, I always say that just like every other place in the world, there's always that dark side and the light, the bright side. But for some reason unknown to me, Africa is always captured in this dark lights and this negative energy, and people really don't know exactly what it feels like and who the people truly are. And I remember there was a time where I googled picture shots in Africa, and the images were always centered around poverty, animals, corruption, and all that stuff. And not to deny that these things actually do exist, they are there. But then there's also the beautiful side. And you can't actually ignore one and then talk about the other. The best you can do is to find balance to show the two, because it's necessary to show every side of it. And it wasn't something that I kind of like set out to do, but it was something I was already doing, but I made sure that I continued in that way and to create this image at the best way possible. So I focused on showing the beauty, the strength and the soul of the African people, especially in the quiet moments. I want to show life, love and dignity. So when I lift my camera, I feel like I'm carrying the dreams and hope of the African people, not just mine, but of everyone that I photograph and everyone that comes into contact with the images, be it in at home or in the diaspora.
Yeah, I think I can say as an African, um, yeah, your image gives so much hope, and it makes me so proud to see that? Because as you say, we don't really see that. The image often put forward, especially from a Western lens, on Africa is one of lack, one of suffering, one of pain. And I mean, those things exist, but Africa is not a single story. And I think
Exactly.
every time I see your work and I engage with your work, I just feel this immeasurable sense of pride, like that was a child like me and so many other people I know. And we're being shown as more than one thing. So I really appreciate that about your work. So thank you for that.
Always. I'll keep
Yeah.
doing my best.
Thank you. Um, so I think of what you do as empowerment through imagery. I imagine that you feel a sense of responsibility in how you showcase your subjects because there is an authenticity with the way you do it. But do you ever feel the tension between honoring a subject's vulnerability and the inevitable ways in which the world might consume their image? And how do you navigate that?
I think the best way I can say this is that anytime I try to photograph myself or take a selfie of myself, um, I always try to make sure that I look good. I look into the mirror, I fix my hair, and when I take the first one and I don't like it, or I feel like it doesn't represent certain parts of my facial features in the best light, then I try my best to fix that. Then I take another one until I feel satisfied to put something out there that represents me in the best way possible and I'm happy with. So if I'm willing to do this for myself, then how much more the people that I photograph? Because if they have the opportunity to photograph themselves, they would put themselves in the best light possible to do that. So with this in mind, I try to protect the truth of the people that I photograph. And my goal is to show them as they are and not as the world wants to see them. And I think this is a very important element because we live in a world that is constantly trying to make you someone else. And the best thing that you can do at this point is to be yourself. And in order to make sure that I'm actually doing my tasks and doing it well, I make sure I do it with care. And doing it with care will require you to be respectful, to ask for consent, to make sure that people know that you're photographing them, and to have them see what you photograph and to tap into that emotional response if they're happy with it or if they're not happy with it. Um, and to constantly reflect on why I'm taking the photos and who it serves. And I feel like with all this in place and me following these guidelines, I'm able to take the pictures without feeling any sense of pressure as long as I know that the people are happy with the way they are being represented and to make sure that the dignity of everyone that I photograph is always intact.
Thank you so much for that. I think it is evident, at least for me, the amount of thought and care that goes into the work and the images that you put out in the world. And so I can imagine it takes a lot of time and patience and also like gaining the trust of the people. I also love what you say about consent and agency, because oftentimes the images of children, especially, but anyone in general, that are put out into the world are done without consent. And I think just having that fundamental respect for people and the identities that they wear to be able to say yes or no, I think that's phenomenal. And there's so much the West, the rest of the world, all of us can learn from this. It's not just something that happens in images. You're not just putting for, hey, look at what is happening here, but you also have to respect the dignity of the people who you're putting forward. I want to talk about since we're talking about your work, your technical mastery and innovation. I can imagine for you, your first picture, is very different from the ones you will take now, or even the ones you took a
Yeah.
couple months ago. They would have evolved, right? And I see in your work is that your use of natural light and composition is quite striking in how you capture those emotions. That I think everything kind of plays into it, and also how that has been impacted by your evolution. So how has your approach evolved, and what has been some significant learning moments in your journey?
So I remember my first image was of some flowers, and this was when I got my first camera. I stepped out to try it out. I bought the camera in the evening and it was too dark to take pictures. So Early in the morning, I was outside. I tried to take some pictures. It was actually a bit overwhelming at first because there was so much like dials and a lot of stuff on the camera that I really didn't understand. Because I was always used to taking pictures on a phone or a point and shoot or an iPad. But with this one, it felt like more rocket science. I set out to learn that, but the one thing that was more important to me was to be able to capture and freeze a moment. And when I did this in natural lightning. And natural lightning is my favorite because I see it like a voice. It speaks on its own. And I always say the best light is the one that God has given us because then with our eyes, we can see things so beautifully that sometimes the camera doesn't do it justice. You can be on a view, you see it's looking so good and beautiful. The moment you raise up your phone or camera, it doesn't really translate to the way you see it. And this natural lighting, it adds emotional depth. So I always look for shadows, look for the warmth and the softness. And with the composition, I keep things simple. I want the viewers to feel and not to overthink. So I found myself experimenting with different lighting conditions. So I would shoot during midday, or shoot late afternoon, early morning, and sunset hours. And I found from my experiments that our skin color absorbs light in a very different way, especially when the light is soft and has this golden hue of sunrise and sunset. And colors, they add emotional depth. And the reason why I'm saying this, I don't know about most people, but for me, you wouldn't find me stand in the hot afternoon sun and be like, wow, the heat is amazing. The light is the light looks great. But you always find me early morning just to watch the sunrise, the golden colors in the background, the color and all that. It makes you appreciate life even more. And it's even more beautiful when the sun is setting to become night. Like you stand there and then it decorates the skies with these amazing colors. And that right there is emotional depth without even me having to hold my camera. So I decided to put these emotions into the images where people can actually be right there and feel like they're watching the sunset. And with the whole extra emotions that the images have, be it someone laughing whilst the sun sets or having a moment of love, it brings this emotional flow. But it took me a while to get there. It took me some learning to figure out what really comes together to help me technically produce images that speaks for itself. So comes down to the light, the shadows, composition, and most importantly, the story. You can take all those things out. If the story is a beautiful one, it will still speak for itself, right? But if you take the story out and you have everything technically beautiful, there's no story, it's still just a picture. But if you're able to master and have everything balanced and bring all this together, and you have an image that is not just technically correct, but also something that would speak for itself. It took me years of learning, and when I say learning, it's not just you going out to shoot, but also looking at what other amazing photographers out there are doing and to pick certain points and ask them questions like, how were you able to do this? And then you come back and then you apply that wisdom or whatever you've learned to your process and improve as a creator.
Songs of Freedom, which is a photograph that garnered you international acclaim. It's this photo where there's a child playing the violin, was it? And other children around this child, some with their fists up in the air. And that was an absolutely gorgeous photo. And I remember the first time I saw it, just being incredibly overwhelmed with emotions. I think it's a gift. And I think that image, at least what came up for me, was the ability to see children like me, so strong, so powerful, yet so beautifully soft. Songs of Freedom also earned you the Agora Awards and a $25,000 check, I believe. And you noted that it was important that you give back to the community where the photo was created. Why was it important to give back? I mean, it would have been just easy to like, all right, great. I took this photo. It was wonderful. I'm out.
Yeah. I believe that blessings are meant to be shared, and I can quite remember the whole process before the creation of the image. Um, it took a lot. It started from a music actually. I was listening to Bob Marley titled Redemption Song, and I found myself at that point at a very low point in my life because then I felt like I was completely lost and wasn't exactly sure where I was heading. So I remember that day I was lying down and this song just popped up. And normally I would listen to music and let my imagination flow, but this time around I was actually paying attention to the lyrics. And there was a part he says, "None but ourselves can free our minds or free ourselves from mental slavery." And that actually stood out to me. So I closed my eyes, and it was actually me playing my guitar and people behind in the background listening as I play. So I wrote it down, and instead of drowning in my feeling of being lost, I decided to go out and figure out how to create something, especially from what I've just seen. And instead of using the guitar, decided to use a violin because the violin for me is a musical instrument that somehow finds a way to express the soul when it's being played. We had to go through like a whole training section. So I had a friend that's a violinist teach them how to play and give them the basics of like playing. And that took a whole day. And then the next day we went back to create the photograph. The guy who held the violin felt like an old soul that came back again and is playing like it was just effortless. And everybody was very happy to come together for us to create this image, parents, children. So I felt that if it wasn't for them and their willingness to trust me and to allow this image to happen, it wouldn't have happened. So me winning, I felt wasn't just for me alone, but for all of us. The photo came from the community that trusted me, and giving back was my way of honoring that trust and saying thank you for allowing this moment to happen, because trust, family, friendship, those are things that stays forever. And I just wanted to do what I felt was right, and I was happy that I did it. And I left feeling that I found my purpose and this is what I should be doing.
I love that. Lessons are meant to be shared. I'm going to save that one. I think honoring trust, that's also quite important. Community is so important. And as you say, having people in your community, in your life that hold you, I think that's also quite important. I mean, being on this journey, how has community held you and supported you in your path?
I guess thanks to social media, we are able to connect with people from different parts of the world. So community doesn't necessarily have to be from your own country. And it's been very helpful. And my audience on Instagram have been there, they've seen, they've supported. And without them, I wouldn't also have gone this far. But I had moments where people didn't really understand why I was taking the pictures the way I was doing. In Ghana, the most typical style of photography would be like events and fashion. There's nothing wrong with that. Naturally, people would assume that this was the path that I should follow, because if you've dropped out from school, you would want to make some money or earn a living. But for me, it wasn't about making the money, it was more about finding myself first. And I tried all this. I shot the weddings, I shot birthdays, I shot events. But anytime I did that, I didn't feel any sense of purpose. I guess I made some money, but where's the money now? It's gone. The pictures probably no one remembers. The people I photographed probably forgotten that I photographed them. But there are images that I had shot that I had made nothing from, but they still speak from for me to this very point. So I think community would be a 50-50, because I had some people who believed in what I was doing and encouraged me to keep going. And I had other people who didn't really see the beauty and did not understand why I was taking this path and tried to tell me to stop and focus on the monetary aspect of it. And there's nothing wrong focusing on the monetary aspect, because you need to eat. You need to pay bills and all that stuff. But if you want more and you need more, especially if you're on a journey, for me, it was finding myself. And there was a whole period in my life where I didn't have a place to stay and I was jumping from one place to another. And in this period, I was creating my best work and I still do. But it made me understand that there's more to life than just having to chase things that don't last. So community was a 50-50, and I think it's necessary for that to be there because it helps you understand. Because if it's all praises, there's a way it gets into your head and you wouldn't really be on that path to actually do something. And if it's all negativity, you wouldn't really be on the path as well. But if there's a balance between those saying that they don't see what you're doing and those who give you encouragement, then you find yourself right in the middle. Then you can follow a path.
I love what you say there. Sometimes I feel like criticisms, be they constructive or not, has a way of sharpening us. Because sometimes when you get the feedback or pushback that this is not the right path, you either sit firmly in your vision and say, how do I move forward? Or say,
Yeah.
how do I make this even better? And I often reflect, I've created a lot of initiatives and programs. And sometimes there's a part of me that also always feels like I even need the naysayers. Like I need somebody to tell me that I cannot. Yeah, like so I can prove to myself because
Yeah.
if there's a single bit of doubt that raises, and that's the thing, when I was young, I was more about I need to prove that I can. And now, and this was more external, like I need to prove to them. But if what they said raised even a tiny bit of doubt in me, then I had to prove to myself, I had to face that fear because that was also a part of the process for me. And sometimes when you know you're good at something, as you say, it gets to your head and you're just like, well, I'm great at this already.
Yeah.
But having that opportunity to constantly unravel and go deeper into the work and what you're creating, I think there's also a great gift there. I think also knowing when to separate. There are some people who their feedback is just not, we're not even going to engage that. We're not going to
Yeah.
work on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but we always need those people who challenge us, and especially when it's coming from a good place. But also at the end of the day, as you say, your vision is yours alone. Whether people see it or not is almost irrelevant. Is how can I bring this to life so it materializes in a way where you see it. So when you were saying about the people who didn't understand how you were taking photos, I bet now they understand, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
Michael, if younger Michael could see you now, what would leave him in awe?
And it's funny you asked me this question because I think recently I had a workshop and we were up in the mountain and I was guiding other photographers on how to take images and use the best lighting and all that. And after everything, I went and I sat down by the edge of the view and I said to myself, like 10 years back, if I could actually see the future and be able to just imagine that I would get to this point and do this, I would kind of like write it off as a dream. I wouldn't really think that it would be something that would happen. Not because I doubt myself, mainly because it would feel like a lot of work at that point. But after going through all that I've gone through, the difficulties, the challenges, and being at this point, if I had the chance to go back again and redo it all over, even having to go through that pain, I would. And I know for a fact that if my dad was here and my mom was alive, they'll be incredibly happy and proud to see what I've been able to do. And not to always point fingers at myself, but to be grateful to God for how far He's brought me and connecting me and having the pleasure to meet amazing people like Claudia, for example. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be sitting down having this discussion with you. So I guess things come together for a reason. Younger me will be very proud as well. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, I think you've done amazing things. And I'm just so incredibly excited for what lies ahead. And then I want to ask my next question. So, what do you want to say to older Mike?
Older Michael?
Yeah. That's a question people don't normally ask, right? They always ask you about like the
Yeah,
younger person.
yeah.
But what would you say to Michael in 20 years?
I'll say your dream matters. Keep dreaming. Keep allowing the visions to flow. And don't give up just because the world doesn't see you yet. Keep going. And you're not alone. Even if you don't have your parents, never feel that you're alone. There are friends, there are people who love you, and just keep going.
Just keep going. I think for artists, for creators, for entrepreneurs, for leaders, for politicians, for people who lead any kind of change and impact, no matter the amount of people you have around you, I tend to think, also because this is a personal experience of mine, that there is something also quite isolating in the being. And perhaps maybe everyone just feels this regardless, that sense of aloneness sometimes in what we create and how we create. So I guess it's a natural process of becoming. And I think we're always becoming, no matter what. And I keep reflecting on sometimes when I was 25 and I thought I had arrived in the world. And then at 35, I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh. And then at 38, I'm like, oh my gosh, like even 3, 4 years, 5 years ago, I thought I had it figured out and I'm still unraveling. I'm still, becoming. And when I'm 50, I'm sure I'll think this as well, like so much to learn and unlearn and relearn, and especially about myself and my process and what matters. So I look forward to older Michael because I think he will be just as phenomenal as you are. I want to ask you about photography. Has it healed anything for you? Like in ways that words might not have been able to?
It's actually difficult for me to find the words,
Mm.
but I would say sometimes it feels heavy, and sometimes it's there's this feeling that I found home, and I'm a very emotional person. Like it's unbelievably crazy how emotional I can be. But there are certain moments where um I find myself really happy and grateful for how far I've been able to come. And then my imagination places people that I really care about around me, and there's this sense of love. And then there are moments where I feel like completely lost and alone. And then I start asking questions like, what's the point? Why keep going if in the end it amounts to nothing? It's a conflict between these two emotions, but it's always important to, as I said, my words to my future self, to keep going regardless of whatever situation that you find yourself in. And to also understand that being alone is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes solitude is a gift, and it allows you the space to reflect and to recharge and come out with a different type of energy. Just be free. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's healed completely. Whether I can heal completely, I don't know. We'll get there as a process, a journey. I know for a fact that life teaches us lessons, and we move forward with whatever we've learned, and we become better people. And then we help people who have heard our stories to become better people themselves. So it's like a chain reaction. So I try my best to respond in a way that is real and human. If it means that I need to feel pain, I allow myself to feel it. If it means I have to feel the happiness and enjoy the moment, I allow myself to do it.
Hmm. And maybe also that pain just coexists beautifully. I love that you say you're very emotional. That I find you a kindred spirit. I am super emotional. I have no interest in talking about the weather or like surface level nonsense.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, tell me you're so, show it all now. Like,
Yeah.
that's my total vibe. My friends would tell you like I have zero patience for the other stuff. And but I also really value that emotional connection to yourself, to your work. And I mean, you can see that you're very rooted. And I do know that sometimes, as somebody who also feels, "Oh, why the heck am I doing this? Why does it matter?" I think your story matters. I think even on days when you don't think it does, I think even your pictures, when people don't even hear from you, just seeing that matters. It uplifts people in places, in nooks and crannies of the world that you don't even know of. And so I guess not, I'm sure you have all the encouragement and courage and everything you need within you. But I think I just also want to say, as somebody who also feels that sometimes, it's important to know that it matters. What you
Yeah,
do matters. Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
I want to ask you for a piece of wisdom. So if you could offer those listening, someone unknown to you, sitting somewhere alone, and exactly this question, wondering if their dreams matter, what would you whisper to them?
It matters.
Hmm.
Even if you don't see for yourself, to take that step and to enjoy the view and to enjoy the process as it comes, be it pain or happiness, that the journey is your journey. The journey feels like an adventure. Makes it worthwhile. It gives you a story to tell. You can put people around the fireside and talk to them, not about how you started from one place and magically appeared at your destination, but what you went through on the way to that path. So, yes, keep believing in your dreams and don't give up.
Your dream matters. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, so I feel like I can talk to you forever, and this has been an incredibly nourishing um, conversation. Experiencing you, and just to hear you speak is just a blessing. So thank you. A closing question. Uh, when you look through the lens now, what are you truly searching for?
I think I'm mostly searching for a connection because at certain point in my life, I lost some sort of connection that I can't really explain what it is. I think this connection should be something or a moment that feels like home, like truth, or maybe in every photo, I'm trying to find myself again. But one thing that I believe is that in every image that I capture, it's like a puzzle piece, a tiny answer to the questions that I've always had. So it's a journey. And for now, I would say I'm searching for a connection, a moment that feels like home.
Thank you for sharing so honestly, so authentically. And thank you for giving us a mirror into your work and your process and the drivers. So thank you. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me too.
Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.